Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to have a stamp sketching video here with nature's set number 26, the fences. I did a couple preliminary stamp sketch kind of test videos using this set, but there's a lot more compositions that I wanted to test out with this set. And in this one, we will get 4 more compositions down. And let's see, I'll be using both the Mohawk Everyday Digital White Coated Silk cardstock and some glossy cardstock. This was the White Coated Silk here. It's somewhere in between matte and glossy, but it is much closer to matte, so it has a little bit of an extra coating on there to keep your media a little bit more surface oriented. Okay, now on this scene right here, I'm working on creating kind of a cliff type of situation, so I'm using the one larger stamp, and then this smaller one curves around to match up with that. Okay, now right there, I was off by about 1/8 of an inch, so you just draw in those 3 rungs there and it attaches right up. So a real easy fix if you don't get things matched up perfectly. Okay, now I'm kind of contemplating what I should use next, the sedge filler or the ledge, and I'm going to go for the ledge here, okay? Now I'm just showing that you can use it, you know, kind of vertical or horizontal. I use it more horizontally than I do vertically, but when it comes to like a cliff situation, you want to go with kind of a more vertical type of a placement of this, okay? Now on this right here, every time you re-ink it, what I'm showing is you just kind of wipe off the edge that's going to transition into other imagery, okay? Now I'm not doing this where it matches up exactly with the fence post because I want there to be, you know, a little bit of a leeway around that. I don't want it, you know, these fence posts to go right into rock or something like that. So I'm going, I don't know, maybe about 1/4 inch off from those posts. Okay, now for another filler stamp, the sedge filler. Now this is one time where I use it upside down. I usually don't do that, but I'm thinking in this kind of configuration, I think going upside down with that fit really well. Now I'm going right side up with it in that upper area, okay? All right, so now we have our little cliff there. And then later on, kind of that little area that I just pointed at, I think that the cliff should go around a little bit more because it, I don't know, it just kind of ends right there. So what you do is you just ink up the portion that you're going to need on that design, mask off, kind of under mask, don't mask all the way, stamp this out, and it blends right in. Okay. Now, you know, later on I'll be coloring and finishing off these stamp sketches. So if something doesn't exactly go right to the edge, you don't need to worry about it because color, toning, shading, adding all that extra media is going to remedy that anyways. Okay, so this is the Seaside Cove small stamp right here. I'm just thinking about some different configurations of it. You can go higher with it, but if you go higher with it, there's the rocks at the bottom of it. So I thought, that will kind of close in the space a little bit, so I'm going to use it lower here. But you'll find out what I do with this later on when I look at this and I think, I need a little bit more scale and distance, so I'll show you what I do with this Seaside Cove after this initial impression here. Get plenty of pressure, left, right, center, top, bottom, but don't rock your stamp, okay? So that you get a full, nice coverage. Now see, I undermasked where the Seaside Cove meets the ledge, okay? Because you can have some of those dots going right into the ledge, and it's not going to be some kind of obtrusive meeting point in that space because these aren't linear designs. You just have a few dots going into the other, so they merge that way, so you don't have to do careful masking. Okay, now this stamp here comes from the Island set. It's also sold individually too, but we're going to put out kind of these aisles going out there into the distance to make that area out there. It kind of has a little bit more scale and distance by adding these different islands out there. Kind of reminds me of, oh, I don't know, like Acadia. I was telling someone that lives in New Zealand that a lot of these kind of isles came from South Island, I believe it is, out in New Zealand. Okay, now I'm going to mask off the ledge there and stamp this other smaller isle coming from around that corner on the ledge. I don't know, I didn't go in there too much. But now I'm thinking, I want more distance back there, okay? So how do you create more distance in terms of the horizon line? Well, in the use of all Stampscapes stamps, using them in their entirety is one option, but more than that, I use my designs partially, more than in their entirety. I don't know, I would say 70–80% of the time. Okay, so now with the Seaside Cove, what I've done is I've inked up, well, most of the design, but I'm going to use probably about half of it. Okay, I'm going up again. I'm going right over the islands because it doesn't matter if you have little dots going into a solid black, but I did mask off my cliff area there. Okay, so plenty of pressure again, and I've undermasked the bottom portion of the impression here, which is the top portion of the first impression. Now look at that. I've extended that out 1 full inch up to the top, and it doesn't look like, the same stamp stamped twice. It just looks like one continuous area there. So that's what you can do. I've even seen people use kind of the lower wave portion as a river. They just kept stacking that kind of the more white-capped area over and over again to make it look more like a fast-running river. All right, so let's stamp out another island out there in the distance. I'll go for a little bit of a larger one here. Sometimes I go for smaller and I go for scale, like a smaller island out in the distance, but I wanted kind of a more formidable one out there. I just thought it would, I don't know, it needed something a little bit more substantial out there in the distance, so I went with the larger one. Smaller one would be fine too, but I don't know. There's several different islands, and I just thought that one would be the perfect size there. So right here, I'm just talking about kind of that open area up top there. And I was thinking, you can do this any time of day here. You can put clouds up there, just some sky, but it could also be a nighttime type of situation. Like, can you imagine a moon, rising or setting over that, over the seas out there? And then you can have that light reflecting on the water. Okay, so going in with my next scene here. Okay, this is a scene using the cabin with fence. And I've been wanting to use this fence set with the cabin with fence just because the cabin with fence has an inherent fence within the design itself. It's a reverse stamp, or a reverse image, so the fence is largely fairly light or white against dark, and the fences in the set are positive, they're dark, okay? But they should all merge together. My pad here is a little bit dry, so I think I ink it up later in this video, but a few of those trees came out fairly light, no problem. Okay, now this is a smaller background fence that comes in the set. And I'm just showing here where you can use a smaller portion of it, where the fences are not kind of curling around into the distance, and you can just use it for that portion. So once again, just using the portion of the stamp for whatever need you come across, okay? So I just merged that fence with the one in the design itself, and they're roughly about the same size. Okay, going in with some filler, with the sedge filler. Okay. The filler stamps you know, it's a very small, very unassuming component of this, but it does give a really good foundation to the scene. Okay, so that in that space to the right of the cabin with fence, we have some open area there, which we can leave as is, but I thought it would be a little bit better if we continue those trees to the right side of the scene. So they're going to represent something, some trees farther back in the distance, though, like there's a meadow in between. Okay. Now I've wiped off a portion of the bottom of those trees just so that we wouldn't have dark trees against a dark fence, because we wouldn't be able to see the fence that way. Okay. All right. So adding in some additional filler for the road, kind of keeping it a little bit more worn away, you know, with these rocks instead of going with the sedge filler or something of that sort. Okay, now you go with different values of those rocks so that it looks nice and varied. Okay, and I wanted just a little bit of foreground, so I'm going to use it here in the lower left-hand corner. I'm not going to use it in the right-hand corner because it would represent grass like right in the middle of the road. So you see that, just that tiny little component right there, I think really kind of frames off that lower left-hand section there. All right, now I'm working foreground there, and I'm looking at that area in the back of the trees, okay? I blotted off, or I stamped off my rocky peaks once, and then I'm going to stamp it out with a second impression, so it's going to be a drier impression and thus a lighter impression. And a lighter impression should represent a more distant area or object, okay? But stamping it a lighter incarnation of black, you know, a gray, maybe 60% gray roughly, it makes it look farther back, but it creates separation between the mountain and those trees in front of it, okay? So you see, you can really maximize all of your different inks and pads that you have by using drier versions of them to create a lighter look. Okay, so this is going on with my next scene here. This one I envisioned kind of the mighty sequoias, redwoods, the giants in the world. I think the tallest living things in the world. And I never used these like this before, but with these fences, it really opens up kind of creating a different, I don't know, perspective on images. I mean, if you put a fence around this, it's really going to change the scale of the image, okay? You know, unless you're putting some kind of like little playhouse fence around, a 20-foot tree or something like that, But using it like this, suddenly we really change the, I don't know, kind of the magnitude of a given object, okay? All right, now these fences right here, there's a left and right side of them. But one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to use this left and right side again, but stamp them upside down, okay? And that will create this kind of wraparound situation. Let's say, I don't know, in this given national park, maybe this is like the oldest or the tallest living tree. I don't know, something like that. Something that would cause us to, kind of block it off. Okay, masking off the tree there. I think I figured out. Oh, wait a minute. That's not that side that I need to stamp that on. It's this side. Okay. So you see that little wraparound right there? Trying to figure this out right here. Okay. I'm still experimenting with these fences. There's a lot of different opportunities, and I see people use these fences in different ways that, I don't know, I didn't even think about. It's like, oh, they can be used like that too, So I get a lot of ideas from other people. All right, see how that kind of matches right in there? And then we have now, that's our foundation image. Now we'll have some filler image, which in other cases might be kind of the dominant type of element, but in this case, they can be kind of a, subservient background element just to kind of enhance that front main element, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to ink this up, and then you'll see me blot it off once, or stamp it off once, pretty firmly, okay? Get a good impression out of it. Wiping off the bottom here, okay? It'll create kind of a misty looking effect, hopefully. All right? And when you have it fade off on the bottom like that, it kind of transitions into that area easier, more gracefully, because it just simply, it disappears down there. So it could represent something like it's in fog, but doesn't that look like it's in the background? If I stamped it as dark as that front tree trunk, it would detract from the attention, you know, that front one should have, especially because it's, you know, closed off, you know, with a fence. There's, you know, gives kind of some deal of importance to it. Now see this one right here, I stamped even drier and lighter, which I probably should have done on that one on the right, but I didn't take off enough ink, so no big deal. Okay, now this little figure here is from Nature Set number 4. I cannot remember the last time I've used this one, but I've had that character in mind for some time. I want to do another cave series. Okay, going into some filler here. There's not a whole lot of filler to add in this case, so I thought about, you know, like some mulch or something like that, some rocks down below here. I think I was going to stamp that figure, but I thought, let's stamp the foundation first, and then we'll decide where to put them. This scene right here, from a compositional standpoint, has, you know, a little bit of problems. It's just so symmetrical. We have those trees to the right and left, which, you know, are identical. Then you have this one tree trunk right smack dab in the middle of the scene, okay? Which, you know, I want it there because it's supposed to have kind of a, I don't know, dramatic balance and attention to that tree. After all, it is fenced off for a reason. But what we'll do is we'll kind of off-center some other elements in here to give this composition a little bit more visual interest in terms of compositional balance. Okay, I'll kind of make things a little bit unbalanced in terms of visual weight. Okay, so we'll take the spruce tree stamp right here and stamp it out. We'll go for a pretty decent dark impression of this. And I think one more, huh? Just one on one side and the character on the other side. It doesn't really balance things out. It kind of makes it an awkward balance. But see that? Now that kind of lends itself to the composition a little bit more. But having those kind of trees like that amongst these bigger ones, there's something that's not really working in terms of the space. So we have the smaller version of these pine trees, and I think that's going to be the thing that'll work really far in the distance. Okay, now one of the things is if that represents something that's pretty far in the distance, you have to make it as light or lighter than those background trees, okay, if it's going to represent something in the background. See that right there? It's just really light, and yeah, I don't know what percentage of gray it would be, maybe a 35% gray or something of that sort. Now this one I didn't re-ink it, so it's stamping out even lighter. Okay. So what we're reiterating here, it's not just filling in, but we're creating a relationship between the farthest represented areas in this scene to the closest one, which is those spruce trees down in the lower left-hand corner. In Western perspective, the higher you stamp something, the farther back in the distance it usually represents. Okay. All right, now I felt that there was still a little bit too much kind of dramatic balance to this scene. Okay, those trees in the back, you know, the tree trunk trios that I've used back there, they're just a little bit too symmetrical. So I just need to create a little bit more a variation within this scene. Okay, so I'm taking the leafless pine small here. See that coming out right there? And I was thinking, okay, let's put a second one in there. And what I'll do is I'll change heights of it for variation. Okay, so see that right there? So we're kind of creating this diagonal within the piece, kind of. It's like almost like a Z or something like that. Okay, you start off with a figure probably in terms of the visual path. Someone will go out to go over to the spruce trees, and then back in the distance to the leafless ones. Okay, fourth and final piece here in the stamp sketches. Now this is the um, lakeside cabin, okay? But I didn't color in the reflections, okay? And I'm just using a scrap piece of paper right here. One that I already laid the tones in some previous video. I think it was an example of what not to do, actually. But I like using these pieces because it's always a good example of how you can take something that doesn't look so great, or how relatively insignificant the background could be when stamping something. So you can see that right now I don't have the reflections down there. So this could be a icy surface right here, a frozen lake or whatever, but what I'll do is I'll change the lakeside cabin into kind of a cabin in, you know, a meadow or something like that, just by not coloring in the reflections. And now I'm just using the sedge filler stamp again that was used in, you know, a couple of these other scenes, or one other scene, and just filling that space in. Or you can put a road or a path leading up to the cabin if you want to. But since this is kind of an experimental video on how to use these fences, I'll use my smaller lead-in style of fences right here, okay? And this piece right here is a 4 1/4 by 11, so it's kind of a slimline format card. Okay, so there's your visual lead-in. Filling in. Now that I have the fences there, I can see, you know, where my fence line ends and the road begins, so you can fill in with some additional sedge filler. And then here comes the tiny rocks again. Tiny rocks small, to be precise. Now see how I kind of make those rocks a little bit darker on the left and right, because in the middle I want that to be kind of the illuminated area. This is going to be kind of central lighting in this piece. Okay, now I'm just trying to decide here on what sky to do. I was thinking the clouds, but maybe the clouds in conjunction with something else. Sometimes I have, you know, a pretty good idea in mind when I start my scenes, but a lot of times I like to leave a lot of it kind of open for interpretation in the process, okay? All right, now this is the cloud cumulus, and I'll be stamping it out in a Prussian blue, which is a very, very dark blue. Okay, so you can stamp this right over your cabin. I just masked off my cabin portion. You don't need to mask off solid dark trees, because something light, a transparent color over a darker color, the darker color is always going to show through. Okay. Now I have this area within that space, and I don't know, the design's starting to come to. I thought about doing kind of an aurora borealis above the clouds here, because that's kind of in the direction that scene's already headed in. But I wanted to use my cloud with lightning. I haven't used the cloud with lightning in a while. Okay, now every time I ink up my cloud, I'm wiping off the perimeter, okay, so that you don't get this harsh, kind of edgy type of cloud showing, okay? You can't tell where one cloud impression ends and the other begins, because we've wiped off the perimeter. You know, I'm wiping it off pretty good, you know, a ½ inch or so. And then you just stamp it out, and where it fades out on the sides, because you've wiped it off, it will fade in to the previous impressions. And you see I'm always kind of rotating the cloud. You can stamp this in many different ways. You can have it with the billows all facing up, you know, kind of on the horizon, or all facing down, coming from you know, the skies or something like that. Okay, now we have this opening in the sky right there, and I was thinking about my cloud with lightning just stamped right smack dab in the middle of that, and you will not have to do any type of masking if you follow kind of, you know, the thing that I was mentioning there, you know, just kind of wiping off the perimeter. I was kind of scraping off the surface there. I think my pad was kind of fuzzy or something like that. I have some very old, maybe 25, 30-year-old Marvy pads, okay? And some of them are kind of disintegrating. But that, I don't know where that came from. That it felt like kind of like, I don't know, like felt or some like fabric was coming off their surface there. Okay, this is the cloud with lightning large. And what I'll do, take your paper towel, wipe off the perimeter. You're not wiping it off where it doesn't stamp at all. You're wiping it off where it'll stamp out drier and lighter, okay? And it's stamping out drier and lighter in the middle of the clouds and in an area of the cloud cumulus where I've always wiped off the perimeter of that. So fading out on the edge, but fading into the lightning, or the lightning is fading into, you know, out from the lightning and into the clouds. You know, so it's just a matter of, I don't know, kind of perspective. Okay, and now there's a lot of solid area on here, so, you know, press firmly in the middle, and then you'll get a nice even impression, okay? All right, so there you have it right there. We have our sky done. This is going to make for a very dramatic setting here with that sky illuminated in the clouds and the cabin and the meadow, illuminated by that lightning bolt strike. Okay, but I was looking at this and I was saying, everything is so kind of symmetrical again. So I just pulled out my lady writer there. And we'll stamp her out. That's the larger one down underneath the cloud with lightning, because I was looking to see if that one would go well with this scene too. But the smaller one worked out better. And the smaller one, now see what I'm doing is I'm wiping off the feet so that it looks like it's standing in the grass. Okay, so I'm just showing some different areas where you could stamp it. So I'm saying don't get too close to the cabin, otherwise you're saying that this lady writer's like 20 feet tall, and don't stamp it too close, too low on the horizon, otherwise it'll, make it seem like those fence posts are, like 15 feet high or something like that. So somewhere in between there's plenty of leeway. It's not like, oh my gosh, I was a 1/16 of an inch off, or an 1/8 of an inch, or even a 1/4 of an inch, okay? That's not really going to matter. All right, so you have that character kind of, coming into the scene. Probably dangerous to be riding around at night, but maybe she's out there kind of rounding up the livestock and, bringing them back home or into the barn or something like that. Okay, so we're looking at these 4 different compositions here, and I'll finish these ones off in a future video. But I'm just talking about in this scene right here, the different possibilities. We can make it a nighttime scene, or can you imagine a moonlit night over that, the body of water with the light reflecting in the water. The lightning strike right there, that'll be the lightest thing in that scene. The redwoods will be, I'm not sure. Usually when you're walking amongst large trees like that, there's a canopy of foliage up there, so I think that one will be in kind of a deeper shaded area, but maybe we'll have some crepuscular rays coming into those trees, those tall trees in the background, giving it a sense of kind of majesty and scale and whatnot. They're supposed to be the tallest living things on Earth, so yeah. Okay, but anyways, that's more stamp sketches with the fences. If you have these or thinking about getting them, you can look at the different possibilities as far as your usage goes. And I think we're just tapping into the surface of it. Thanks for watching.